Hi, welcome. Let's talk about Raider's Spectral Shield Throw. As a Raider, your damage will scale well with frenzy charges thanks to Avatar of the Slaughter. It's a very fast-paced ascendancy where we will use projectiles to deal converted attack damage. It's quite unique, as the damage depends less on your weapon and more on a shield, much like in Shield Crush. Raider has a unique Avatar of the Veil Keystone that applies exposure of all elements to the enemies nearby. It will help immensely since you'll be dealing only elemental damage at point blank. You can even equip Heat Shiver and Expedition's End to freeze all the bosses and add tons of extra fire damage. Using the freshly buffed Emperor's Vigilance unique shield, you can reach very high amounts of damage without worrying about crafting your own rare shield, which was usually the hardest part. Combine it with Seething Fury and Phantasmal Spectral Shield Throw for an enormous damage boost. Patch 3.20 introduced the original Sin Ring, which can be easily implemented into the build and make it deal chaos damage instead of cold. If you can afford it, be sure to apply Withered debuff, change the gem setups, and Ascendancy keystones. We will mention these minor changes later in detail. Spectral Shield Throw is a skill that adds more flat physical damage per evasion or armor on a shield. You will be using Emperor's Vigilance to later deal converted cold damage. Gaining more critical strike chance will be easy. The attack speed is also naturally high. The build has a regular 4 to 5k maximum life, up to 1k of energy shield, a lot of armor gained via iron reflexes, the ability to fully suppress every spell hit, a decent chance to block spells and attacks, and unique defenses granted by the shield that we will expand on later. Clear speed is great, but if you want to go faster, get the 3 additional shards as the Helmet Lab enchantment. Single target damage is very good, 10 million DPS is a reasonable assumption. The build's price is tied to Emperor's Vigilance, which is very cheap after a few days of a league start. All the other items can be of rare quality, so the price is very variable. The shield, as mentioned already, is the most important part of the build. Seething Fury is a mandatory jewel. Rimsaro gloves may be useful, but the 100% of physical to cold conversion can be achieved with rare gloves, cold mastery, and a Watcher's Eye too. There are, of course, some uniques you can aim for, but these are in most cases outclassed by very good and expensive rares. Heat Shiver is good under the condition that you can efficiently freeze bosses. It adds tons of fire damage but requires some investment into cold ailments. Obliteration is a cheap and fitting weapon that improves your clear speed and adds tons of chaos damage to your attacks. It may sound strange, but the Princess is not half bad for this build, mostly due to the 30% of physical damage as extra cold damage. It's extremely common, requires level 10, and you may want to keep it until upgrading to a better rare weapon. Emperor's Vigilance is the best shield you can get for a reasonable price. It provides a lot of armor and energy shield translated into damage, and on top of that gives spell block chance and Glancing Blows keystone. Keep in mind that you will receive most of the block damage, and if it's chaos damage, it won't bypass the energy shield. The unblocked damage will always ignore your energy shield. Lionized Vision, a body armor that requires a lot of strength, which may be a problem, but it's generally good armor. It provides a decent amount of life, armor, and most importantly, an additional link for your main setup, level 15 Pierce. You could make use of the Covenant body armor if you're using Original Sin, it would get you much more chaos damage. Expedition's End is very good when combined with Heat Shiver or Original Sin. It makes freezing much easier, chills nearby enemies automatically, and even allows fire or chaos damage to freeze too. This one is usually very expensive. Interesting scaling with frenzy charges, which you will have 8 or more of, makes Darkray Vectors a good option for most Raider builds. If you lack an evasion, try 3-step Assault Boots. These provide a lot of life and some elemental ailments avoidance. The downside is the lack of any elemental resistances. Rimsaro are one of the best gloves if you plan to start on a budget. They provide 100% physical to cold conversion, which is the foundation of this build. Belt of the Deceiver provides a very strong defensive bonus in form of reducing extra damage you take from critical strikes, while also intimidating enemies to boost your DPS. Pandemonious is very good for almost all cold damage builds. Its most notable stats are a massive 20% cold penetration, a guaranteed chill, and blinding on hit. Ashes is good, as you can combine it with Phantasmal SST, which will result in a massive boost to critical strike chance. It also increases your reservation efficiency. Original Sin converts all your cold to chaos damage, which ignores all chaos resistance. It's extremely good, but remember you still need to convert your physical damage first. We've used it in the gameplay footage, combined with the Expedition's End and Heat Shiver. One of the most important parts of the build is Seething Fury Jewel, which increases your damage based on the energy shield of your shield, which is high. Brutal Restraint is only used for the extra dexterity and upgrades for notables in its radius, which may be quite good. We've used a Thread of Hope with a massive ring to put in a socket near the Supreme Ego Keystone. It can get you tons of offensive, defensive, and utility nodes there. Watcher's Eye. Hatred or Precision mods are usually the best options for this type of build. It can be a huge bonus to your DPS. It's an expensive jewel, so don't bother with it unless the other parts of your gear are in place. It also provides a way to convert damage via one of the Hatred's mods. Despite the high amount of ES from your shield, it's still a life build, so seek maximum life wherever you can. Your damage will come in the form of elemental damage, mostly cold, critical strike, attack, and projectile damage modifiers are useful for this build. On top of that, build is very flexible. Both Iron Reflexes and Ghost Dance Keystones are in the range of one passive point. You can pick one of them. On a helmet, seek maximum life, spell suppression, and resistances. Helmets can also offer a variety of exotic modifiers as explicits from Shaper, Elder, and Elder Slayers, or Eldritch implicits if it's not influenced by them. Since your Spectral Shield Throw deals only physical damage by default, look for extra elemental damage based on physical damage on a weapon. It's the best way to increase your DPS since you won't use the weapon to deal damage anyway. You'll use the shield, so only the global modifiers matter here. Spiked Shield is the best base. It grants the most evasion and energy shield. You can find a few rare mods that will increase these stats, and if you're abnormally rich you can look for synthesized implicit modifiers that will help you with your goal. It'd be very hard and expensive to make it better than its unique counterpart, impossible even, some may say. Rare body armor outshines any unique once it's properly crafted. There are a lot of offensive mods like base crit chance, additional curses, etc. Rare boots are generally better than Darkrai vectors in most cases. After some investment, you can also get great mods of elusiveness and tailwind. To replace Rimsaros you will need to acquire elemental conversion elsewhere. You can craft up to 25% cold conversion on a bench, and an additional 10 to 35% can be acquired from the blue Eldritch orbs. Other than that, get max life, resistances, suppression, and accuracy. Stygian Vice is one of the best bases for a belt. It allows you to store an Abyss Jewel in there. Maximum life, strength, elemental resistances, and elemental damage with attacks are the most valuable mods in this slot. The Amulet is one of the most important parts of the build in terms of scaling your DPS. Look for some life and as many offensive mods as you can afford. Usually these are critical strike modifiers. In terms of damage, it's comparable to the Ashes of the Stars. Rings. You won't need any curse on hit unless you can apply an additional one via anointment or body armor mod. Look for maximum life, elemental resistances, and some offensive mods such as global critical strike multiplier or elemental damage with attack skills. Jewels can store up to 4 different mods and their variety is huge. Increased maximum life is one of the most important affixes, but it needs to be combined with other offense-oriented mods to make it worth equipping. There are quite a few unique flasks you can use, but don't take all of them. You will probably need some green magic flasks too. Extra cold damage based on your physical damage is extremely beneficial. Use Taste of Hate flask to increase your DPS and reduce cold damage taken. Bottled Faith is the best sulfur flask in the game due to its critical strike mods and huge radius. Atziri's Promise grants extra chaos damage based on your physical damage. You're not suited to deal chaos damage, unless you're wearing Original Sin, but it's still useful due to chaos resistance and life leech. Use Sin's Rebirth with Original Sin. It grants 30% of physical damage as extra chaos damage, and extinguishes you on use. Other flasks worth keeping are Jade Flask for more evasion, Life Flask with instant life recovery on use, Diamond Flask for an increased crit chance, Quartz Flask for spell suppression, or Quicksilver Flask for movement speed. These should remove bleeding, increase your attack speed, crit chance, armor, evasion, or movement speed as their implicit modifiers. Spectral Shield Throw is the main DPS skill for this build, a projectile attack that deals base physical damage based on the evasion or armor rating of your shield. Upon impact, it releases shards. You will need the Phantasmal version. Link it with Vicious Projectiles, increased critical damage, elemental damage with attacks, cold penetration, and inspiration support gems. If you're using Original Sin, switch elemental damage with attacks and cold penetration with Void Manipulation and Withering Touch. Grace massively increases your evasion rating. You can use the Vault version for additional survivability. Precision adds more accuracy rating and critical strike chance for your character. Depending on your mana pool, you can use a lower level of Precision too. Use Hatred for more and extra cold damage equal to a quarter of your physical damage. It's the most important DPS aura for the build. Defiance Banner grants increased armor and evasion rating for the low mana reservation cost. You probably won't need to link these auras to Enlighten. Sniper's Mark is usually the best curse for projectile builds. Cursed enemies take more damage from projectiles and make your projectiles split on hit for extra area coverage. Mark on hit support will cause a linked mark to be cast on a rare or unique enemy you hit with any attack. Additionally, you can link it all up with Life Tap to spend no mana but life on the setup. Molten Shell is a guard spell that absorbs a huge percentage of incoming damage based on your armor rating. Link it with Cast when damage taken. It will automatically trigger Molten Shell when in danger. Flame Dash is a mobility skill that allows you to move through terrain where Whirling Blades cannot be used. Whirling Blades is another optional mobility skill used to traverse through the terrain. It's useful in builds with a lot of attack speed that makes use of claws, swords, or daggers. Link it with Faster Attacks support gem. Frost Bomb will apply a debuff on the enemy, highly reducing their life recovery. It's not really needed for its exposure as you already have the Avatar of the Veil in use. If you're wearing Original Sin, you can replace it with Withering Step. Use Ancestral Protector for 20% additional attack speed while this totem is active. Chose Phantasmal quality for the best effect. Blood Rage is used here primarily to provide attack speed and grant some life leech. Killing all 3 bandits is the best approach to the quest from Act 2, it grants 2 extra passive skill points. For a major god, we've selected the Brine King. It prevents multiple stun instances, and after upgrading prevents freezing, reduces the chill effect by half, and increases stun and block recovery. Soul of Shikari is the minor god we've picked due to the relatively low chaos resistance. It mitigates poison and chaos damage. If you haven't taken Iron Reflexes, switch it with Soul of Garukin to reduce the shock effect. The passive skill tree is pretty standard for an elemental attack damage build. Focus on attack, cold, and elemental damage, critical strike nodes, spell suppression, accuracy, mana reservation efficiency, maximum life, and evasion should be allocated too. Pick up all the extra maximum frenzy charges, point blank keystone, Disciple of the Slaughter, Retaliation, and Marked for Death. Iron Reflexes is a great addition, but can be replaced with Ghost Dance. For masteries, pick the life ones for more maximum life, Suppression Mastery for an increased critical strike chance, Grace's Reservation Efficiency as Evasion Mastery, Precision's Reservation Efficiency as Accuracy Mastery, Increased Effect of your Marks as Mark Mastery, Critical Strike Multiplier against unique enemies as Critical Mastery, Increased Damage per Armor, or Crit Multiplier per Energy Shield on a Shield as Shield Mastery, Increased Effect of Non-Damaging Ailments as Elemental Mastery if you're using Heat Shiver, and the cold conversion as cold mastery if you're not using Rim Sorrow gloves. That's all for this guide. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Bye.